Sometimes the hardest journeys aren't about finding new places, they're about finding the pieces of ourselves we left behind. 58-year-old Tenny Allard knows this better than most. For 6 years, she's walked the same mountain trails her great-grandmother once traveled as a frontier herbalist. She carries an old journal and dried roots in her pack, following footsteps laid down over a century ago. But high on a wind-scoured peak in the Bitterroots, she finds an abandoned, covered wagon sitting where no wagon should be. Inside are remnants of someone's final moments. What Tenny discovers connects her to a past she thought she knew and a stranger who might not be a stranger at all. Could this impossible find reveal a family secret buried for generations? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The cabin sits at the end of a gravel road that turns to mud in spring and dust in summer, 3 miles from the nearest neighbor and 7 from the small town of Derby. Tenny Allard chose it precisely for that distance. Not far enough to be reckless, but far enough that people don't drop by unannounced. The structure itself is modest. 2 rooms, a wood stove, a porch that faces west toward the Bitterroot range. She's lived here for 3 years now, ever since the divorce papers were signed and her teaching contract at the community college wasn't renewed. Some people called it running away. Tenny called it coming home to a place she'd never been. The morning routine is always the same. Up at dawn, coffee brewed strong and black, then an hour with the journal before she decides whether to hike or stay. The journal is her constant companion, more reliable than any person has ever been. It's small, bound in leather that's worn soft as cloth, and it smells faintly of dried lavender and thyme. Her great-grandmother, Lucinda Allard, kept it during the 1,880 seconds, documenting every plant she found in these mountains, every remedy she mixed, every trail she walked. The entries are precise, written in a careful hand that suggests education uncommon for the era. Pressed flowers are tucked between pages, still holding faint color after more than a century. Roots and seeds are sketched with botanical accuracy, and in the margins, sometimes, there are notes that have nothing to do with plants. The 14th of June, 1882, found wild ginger near the North Fork, dug 3 roots, weather turning. Then, in smaller script, she is afraid again. I do not know how to help her. Tenny has read the journal cover to cover at least 50 times, and those margin notes still puzzle her. Who was afraid? Lucinda lived alone for most of her documented years, visiting homesteads to treat illness and injury, trading her knowledge for food and supplies. The historical record shows she was respected, even sought after when doctors were days away, and winter made travel impossible. But the personal details are sparse. No husband is ever mentioned, no children, just the work, the plants, the mountains, and those cryptic asides that suggest someone else, always unnamed, always present in shadow. Tenny closes the journal and wraps it in oilcloth, tucks it into her pack alongside the other essentials. Dried biscuits, hard cheese, water bottles, first aid kit, GPS unit, paper map as backup. She's learned not to trust technology alone up here. The mountains have a way of making batteries die and signals vanish. She adds a trowel, collection bags, a small notebook of her own. For 6 years, she's been following Lucinda's routes, matching the descriptions to actual geography, finding the plants her great-grandmother documented. It started as idle curiosity, something to fill the empty hours after the marriage ended. But it became something else. A mission, maybe, or a conversation across time. The divorce wasn't dramatic. No infidelity, no fights. Just a slow realization that she and Robert had been living parallel lives for the last decade, rarely intersecting except at dinner and in sleep. He wanted retirement to mean golf and cruises and a condo in Arizona. She wanted to understand where she came from, to touch the ground her ancestors walked. When she suggested spending summers in Montana, near the land Lucinda had roamed, He looked at her like she'd proposed moving to Mars. The lawyers handled the rest. Her daughter, Michelle, 32 and practical to her bones, thought the whole thing was a midlife crisis. "Mom, you're a botanist. You can study plants anywhere. Why does it have to be in the middle of nowhere?" Tenny tried to explain about roots, about needing to know the women who came before, about feeling untethered. Michelle listened with the patient expression she used when humoring people, then suggested therapy. Her son, David, 29 and living in Seattle, just sent occasional texts asking if she was okay. She always said yes. The truth is more complicated than okay. The truth is that Tenny spent 30 years teaching undergraduates about plant biology, grading papers, attending faculty meetings, and somewhere in all of it, she lost the thread of why she'd loved plants in the first place. Then one Christmas, cleaning out her mother's attic after she'd moved to assisted living, Tenny found a box of family documents, birth certificates, old photographs, and at the bottom, wrapped in brown paper, Lucinda's journal. Her mother said she'd inherited it from her own mother, but had never paid it much attention. "Just some old plant notes," she'd said with a shrug. But Tenny opened it and felt something shift. Here was a woman who'd lived alone by choice, who'd walked hundreds of miles through wilderness, who'd been essential to her community, not despite being a woman, but because of what she knew. Lucinda hadn't needed permission or validation. She'd simply done the work. And reading those careful entries, Tenny realized she'd spent 3 decades seeking approval from committees and administrators, trimming herself to fit institutional spaces that didn't really want her curiosity. They wanted her compliance. So she stopped complying. The hike today is one she's done a dozen times, following Lucinda's notes from August 1881. Climbed to the meadow above Tin Cup Creek, found arnica in abundance, also wild onion and biscuit root. The view extends north to the Sapphire Range. A person could see forever from there. Tenny has confirmed the arnica and onion, photographed the biscuit root, stood at that viewpoint and looked north just as Lucinda did. But there are always new details, new questions. Today, she's looking for a plant Lucinda mentioned but didn't name, described only as small white flowers, 5 petals, grows in rocky soil near summit. Bitter taste, but settles the stomach. The trail starts easy, winding through ponderosa pine and Douglas fir. The morning, still cool enough that she doesn't sweat through her shirt. Birds call from branches, nuthatches, chickadees, the distant drumming of a woodpecker. She's learned to walk quietly, to notice things. The way light slants different depending on the hour. The smell of sun-warmed pine needles. The feel of trail under boots, whether it's packed earth or loose stone. This is the education she should have gotten decades ago, but better late than never. At mile 2, she stops where the trail crosses a creek. The water runs clear over smooth rocks, cold enough to numb her hands when she dips them in to drink. Lucinda wrote about this creek, noted that it never ran dry, even in drought years. Tenny wonders if that's still true, if climate change has altered these small, reliable things. She makes a note to check flow rates across seasons, to compare them with historical records. It's the kind of project that might take years. She has years. That's the gift of leaving behind the life that didn't fit. Vernon Pitch is sitting on a boulder where the trail forks, whittling a piece of cedar and looking like he's been there for hours. He probably has been. Vernon is 72, a retired forest ranger who still treats these mountains like his jurisdiction. He's lean and weathered, with a white beard he keeps trimmed short and eyes that miss nothing. Tenny has known him for 2 years, ever since she started hiking regularly. He never intrudes, just shows up sometimes at trail junctions or viewpoints, offers a quiet greeting, shares information about trail conditions or wildlife sightings. He's become something like a friend, though they've never discussed anything personal. "Morning, Tenny," he says, without looking up from his carving. "Morning, Vernon. What are you making?" "Whistle. For my grandson. He's learning bird calls." Vernon tests the whistle, produces a credible chickadee sound, nods approval. You heading up to Tin Cup Meadow? That's the plan. Weathers. Turning this afternoon. Thunderstorms moving in from the west. You'll want to be off the ridge by 2. Tenny checks her watch. It's just past 8. Plenty of time. Vernon finally looks at her, his gaze direct but not unfriendly. You've been pushing hard lately. Everything all right? It's the most personal question he's ever asked. Tenny considers deflecting, then decides against it. Vernon has earned honesty. I'm looking for something. Something specific, or just looking? Both, maybe. My great-grandmother walked these trails in the 1,880 seconds. I'm following her roots, trying to understand what she saw, what she knew. There are gaps in her journal, things she doesn't explain. I want to fill them in. Vernon carves a few more shavings from the whistle, considering. My grandmother was Salish. She used to say that some gaps are there for a reason, that sometimes the things people don't write down are the things they most need to protect. Protect from what? From being forgotten wrong, from being turned into something they weren't. He looks up at the mountains, at the peaks, still holding snow in their highest reaches. You ever think maybe your great-grandmother left those gaps so you'd have to walk the same ground to understand? So the knowing would come from the land, not just the page? It's the kind of observation that sounds simple but isn't, the kind that settles into your thinking and changes it from the inside. Tenny nods slowly. Maybe. I hadn't thought of it that way. Well. Vernon stands, pockets the whistle and his knife. I'm heading down to check on a trail washout near Ross Creek. You need anything? I'm good. Thanks for the weather warning. Stay safe up there. He starts down the trail, then pauses. Tenny, whatever you're looking for, I hope you find it. But don't forget to notice what you're not looking for, too. That's usually where the real discoveries are. Then he's gone, moving with the easy efficiency of someone who's walked these trails for 50 years. Tenny continues upward. The trail gets steeper, switchbacking through areas where wildfire burned through a decade ago. Young aspens are reclaiming the space, their white bark bright against the charred snags of older trees. Lucinda wrote about fires too, how they cleared the understory and brought certain plants back in abundance. After fire, the fireweed comes first, then the berry bushes, then slowly the trees. The land knows how to heal itself, if given time. Time. Tenny has given herself time, or taken it, or maybe just stopped resisting it. The divorce was finalized on her 55th birthday. Michelle sent flowers and a card about new beginnings. David called and said he was proud of her for choosing herself. Robert's lawyer sent the final paperwork, and Tenny drove to Montana with everything that mattered packed in her car books, field equipment, her grandmother's quilt, and Lucinda's journal. She found the cabin 3 weeks. Later, rented it for a month. Then asked the owner if she could buy it. He quoted a price that was laughably low by California standards. She paid cash from her half of the house sale and became a Montana resident by autumn. The meadow opens up at mile 4, just as Lucinda described. Wide and grassy, dotted with granite outcrops and rimmed by subalpine fir. The wildflowers are past peak, but there's still color-purple aster, yellow rabbit brush, the white heads of bistort. Tenny circles the meadow slowly, checking each rocky area for the mystery plant. Small white flowers, 5 petals, bitter taste. She finds yarrow, but that's not right. She finds saxifrage, but the petal count is wrong. She photographs everything, makes notes, moves methodically. An hour passes. The sun climbs higher, warming the meadow until grasshoppers leap from every step. She finds the plant finally, tucked against a boulder on the meadow's north edge. Small, easily overlooked, with flowers so white they're almost translucent. 5 perfect petals. She photographs it from multiple angles, takes a small sample of leaves, touches her tongue to one. Bitter, yes, with an astringent quality that makes her mouth pucker. She checks her field guide, cross-references characteristics. Luisia rediviva bitterroot, the state flower of Montana, and she'd somehow missed it all these years. Lucinda had found it too, had known its properties, had probably used it medicinally. Tenny feels a rush of connection, of alignment across time. They stood in the same place, studied the same plant, tasted the same bitterness. For a moment, the century between them collapses. She sits on the boulder, drinks water, eats a biscuit, and opens the journal to the entry about this meadow, rereads it, looking for anything she missed. The description is accurate, down to the direction of the view. But in the margin, there's another of those cryptic notes. I think of her here. She would have loved this place. But safety is more important than beauty. Who would have loved it? And why did safety matter more? Tenny has theories. Maybe Lucinda had a daughter who died young. Maybe a sister. Maybe a friend or lover, though the historical record suggests Lucinda never married and lived alone. But someone was important enough to be worried about, to be protected, to be mentioned in these careful margins across years of entries. The wind picks up, blowing from the west, just as Vernon predicted. Clouds are building on the horizon, tall and dark. Tenny checks her watch 1:30. Time to head down. She takes a last look at the meadow, commits it to memory, then starts the descent. The return is always faster, gravity working with her instead of against. She reaches the trailhead by 3, just as the first drops of rain start to fall. In the truck, sitting in the parking lot as rain hammers the windshield, she makes notes in her own journal. Plant identified. Location confirmed. Connection felt. Then she writes, Lucinda, who were you protecting? What happened that required such careful silence? The rain doesn't answer, but Tenny has learned patience. The mountains give up their secrets slowly, and only to those willing to keep returning. The plan for the 3-day trek has been forming for months. There's a region Lucinda mentioned repeatedly in her later entries, a high ridge that runs along the spine of the Bitterroots, accessible only in late summer when the snow melts back enough to allow passage. The journal describes it in fragments across several years. The 15th of August, 1887, reached the high peak where wind never stops, found alpine forget-me-not and moss campion. The world spreads out in every direction. A person could see their whole life from up there. And later, more cryptically, I think of the peak often. What I left there. What remains? What remains? The phrase has haunted Tenny for 2 years, ever since she first read it carefully enough to notice the weight. Behind those words, Lucinda left something on that peak, something that mattered enough to mention, but not enough to explain. Tenny loads her pack with supplies for 3 days, freeze-dried meals, water filtration system, tent, sleeping bag rated for high altitude, emergency beacon. She's hiking alone, which Vernon would disapprove of if he knew, but she's told him she's only going up to Tin Cup Meadow again. It's a small deception, and it sits uncomfortably, but this feels like something she needs to do without company. Some discoveries require solitude. The trail starts familiar, the same route she's taken dozens of times. But at the upper meadow, instead of turning back, she continues on a fainter path that switchbacks up the ridge. The trees thin out, replaced by stunted whitebark pine and then just rock and alpine tundra. The air gets thinner. Her lungs work harder. By the time she camps the first night, she's above timberline, the tent staked on a flat spot between boulders, the sunset turning the western sky orange and purple. She eats dinner, watching the light fade, then crawls into the sleeping bag and reads Lucinda's journal by headlamp. The entries about the peak are scattered but consistent. Lucinda came here at least 5 times over a span of years, always in August, always alone. The botanical observations are detailed alpine plants that exist nowhere else, adapted to brutal conditions. But the personal notes grow more revealing. August 1000, 889, returned to the peak. What I left is still there, untouched. Perhaps that is mercy. Perhaps that is cruelty. I cannot decide. What did she leave? And why? The second day is harder. The trail disappears entirely, and Tenny navigates by compass and GPS, following the ridgeline northeast. The wind is constant, strong enough to lean into. Her face burns from sun and windburn despite sunscreen. She stops frequently to rest, to drink water, to let her heartbeat slow. At noon, she reaches a false summit and realizes the actual peak is another mile ahead, separated by a saddle that drops steeply before climbing again. She almost turns back. The sensible thing would be to turn back, but she's come this far, and something in her refuses to stop now. She descends into the saddle, crosses it, begins the final climb. The rocks here are loose, shifting under her boots. She moves carefully, testing each step. The altitude makes her head pound. She stops, takes ibuprofen, drinks more water, continues. And then she's there. The peak, wind-scoured, barren except for lichens and the toughest alpine flowers. The view is exactly as Lucinda described, endless in every direction, mountains rolling away to horizons in layers of blue and purple. She can see the Sapphire Range to the east, the valley she lives in to the west, peaks she doesn't know the names of stretching north and south. It's beautiful in a way that makes her chest ache. She turns slowly, scanning the summit. Rock, lichen, wind, sky. Nothing that looks like something left behind. She checks her GPS against Lucinda's description, confirms she's in the right place. So where? And then she sees it. Tucked against the leeward side of a boulder formation, protected from the worst of the weather, is a covered wagon, or what remains of one. The canvas is shredded, flapping in strips. The wooden frame is splintered and weathered grey. One wheel is completely gone, the axle resting on rock. But the basic structure is unmistakable. A covered wagon, on a peak where no wagon should ever be. Tenny's first thought is that she's hallucinating from altitude. She blinks, rubs her eyes, looks again. The wagon is still there. Her second thought is that it's impossible. No wagon trail reaches this elevation. The terrain below is too steep, too rocky. Even if someone had somehow dragged it up here, why? For what purpose? She approaches slowly, as if it might vanish if she moves too quickly. The wood is old, sun-bleached and cracked. She runs her hand along the side panel, feels the grain beneath her fingers. Real. Definitely real. There are carvings on the wood, names or dates maybe, but too weathered to read clearly. She circles the wagon, documenting everything with her camera. The inside is sheltered enough that some items have survived. She sees them through gaps in the canvas before she even looks inside. Bones. Human bones. A skeleton, still partially clothed in deteriorated fabric, lying on what must have been a makeshift bed. The skull is turned toward the opening, as if watching the view. Tenny's breath catches. This is a death site. Someone died here, inside this wagon, on this impossible peak. She should leave, should report this to authorities, should not disturb anything. But she's already disturbing it by being here. And she knows, somehow she knows this is connected to Lucinda. She pulls on latex gloves from her first aid kit, treating this like the archaeological site it is. Carefully, she moves aside a section of torn canvas to see better. The skeleton is small-framed, probably female. The clothes are remnants of what might have been a dress, long-sleeved and simple. Near the hand bones, something glints in the late afternoon light. A locket, badly tarnished, but intact. Tenny photographs it in place, then carefully picks it up. It's surprisingly heavy, made of tin or pewter. There's a clasp, still functional after all these years. Her hands shake as she opens it. Inside are two photographs. The old kind, tintype, or daguerreotype. The images are faded but visible. One shows a young woman, maybe 20, with dark hair pulled back and deep-set eyes. The other shows a small child, a girl perhaps 3 or 4 years old, sitting on a chair and looking solemnly at the camera. Tenny stares at the woman's face. There's something familiar about it. something that pulls at her memory. She takes out her phone, scrolls through saved images until she finds the one she's thinking of, a photograph of Lucinda Allard from the 1,890 seconds, one of only 3 known to exist. She holds the phone next to the locket, comparing faces. The resemblance is striking. Not identical, but similar enough to suggest family. Same deep-set eyes, same strong jawline, same serious expression. Sisters? Cousins? The child's identity is less clear, but something about the way she's dressed, the formality of the pose, suggests this was a special photograph, something treasured. Tenny sits back on her heels, trying to process this. A woman died here, in a wagon that couldn't possibly be here, holding a locket with photographs of people who looked like Lucinda's family. This is what Lucinda left on the peak, not an object, a person. A story. A secret. She explores the rest of the wagon carefully. There are scattered belongings, deteriorated leather pouches that might have held herbs or food, fragments of what could have been a journal but is too water-damaged to read, a child's small wooden doll with most of its paint worn away, and in the corner, a leather bag that survived better than most items, protected by its position. Inside are dried plants, carefully bundled. Tenny recognizes some yarrow, arnica, sage, the same plants Lucinda documented, a herbalist's supplies. This woman was a herbalist, like Lucinda, related to Lucinda. Died alone on this peak with her herbs and her locket and her impossible wagon. Tenny's mind races through possibilities. Maybe the wagon was hauled up in pieces and assembled here. Maybe the woman was brought here by others, left to die. Maybe she came herself, though that seems unlikely given the terrain. No matter the how, the why remains mysterious. She photographs everything, takes GPS coordinates, makes detailed notes. The light is fading, and she needs to set up camp before dark. She can't stay next to the wagon. It feels disrespectful and, frankly, unnerving. She finds a flat spot 50 yards away, pitches, her tent, boils water for dinner. But she can't eat. She sits outside the tent, staring at the wagon silhouette against the darkening sky. Someone died there. Someone related to Lucinda. Someone whose story was important enough that Lucinda returned to this peak multiple times over years, checking on what remained. Tenny pulls out her phone, scrolls through the images she took. The locket photographs, the skeleton, the wagon itself. She zooms in on the side panel, where those weathered carvings are. In one photo, the late angle of sunlight makes them slightly more visible. She enhances the image, squints at the screen, and there, barely legible, carved into the wood, 1,891. The year Lucinda's journal entries become sparse and sad. The year something changed. Tenny sits in the gathering darkness, holding her phone, looking at a date carved by someone long dead, and knows her life just shifted. She came looking for plants and found a woman. She came looking for the past and found a mystery that won't let her go. Tomorrow she'll hike back down. She'll report this to someone, probably. She'll try to understand what she's found. But tonight, she sits vigil with the dead woman on the peak and wonders what story ended here and why Lucinda never told it. The descent takes most of the next day. Tenny moves carefully, her mind only half on the trail. The other half is spinning through questions, theories, impossible explanations. By the time she reaches her truck, she's exhausted physically and mentally. She drives home in a daze, parks, sits in the cab for 20 minutes before finding the energy to go inside. The cabin feels different now. Smaller, maybe, or just less sufficient. She spreads her photographs across the kitchen table, hundreds of them, documenting every angle of the wagon, the skeleton, the belongings. She connects her camera to her laptop, downloads everything, backs it up to cloud storage and an external drive. This matters. This is evidence of something that matters. Then she opens the locket photographs on her screen, enlarges them as much as the resolution allows. The woman's face fills the monitor. Tenny gets up, goes to the shelf where she keeps the small wooden box of family photographs. Her grandmother's face looks back at her from a photo taken in the 1950 seconds. Josie, she was called, short for Josephine, married name Morrison, but born something else. Tenny realizes she's never actually confirmed what her grandmother's maiden name was. Her mother would know, but her mother is in assisted living now, and her memory comes and goes. She examines the box's contents more carefully. Birth certificates, marriage licenses, death certificates. Her grandmother's birth certificate is near the bottom. Josephine Temperance Brennan, born 1882. Father, Patrick Brennan. Mother, Lucinda Brennan, formerly Allard. Wait. Tenny rereads it 3 times. Lucinda Brennan, formerly Allard. So Lucinda did marry, despite the journal never mentioning a husband. And she had a daughter, Josephine, who was Tenny's grandmother, which makes Lucinda not her great-grandmother, but her great-great-grandmother. She's been miscounting generations all along. But if Josephine was born in 1882, and the wagon date is 1891, and the woman in the wagon looks like Lucinda, but isn't Lucinda, because Lucinda lived until at least 1910 according to family records, then who? Tenny pulls up her laptop browser, starts searching genealogy databases. The Allard family tree is sparse, typical of frontier families where records were inconsistent. Lucinda Allard appears in census records starting in 1870, age 12. Parents, Thomas and Elizabeth Allard, both deceased by 1875, and there a younger sibling, Temperance Allard, born 1867, 4 years younger than Lucinda. The name clicks into place. Josephine Temperance Brennan. Named after her aunt? Or Tenny's heart starts pounding, named after her mother. She grabs her phone, dials Michelle's number. It rings 4 times before her daughter answers, sounding harried. Mom? Is everything okay? I need to ask you about family history. A pause. Mom, I'm at work. Can this wait? No. Please. It's important. Do you know anything about how Grandma Josie was named? Who she was named after? Michelle sighs. I really don't have time for this right now. Can I call you back tonight? Michelle. Please. Another pause, longer. When Michelle speaks again, her voice has shifted to patient concern, the tone you use with someone who's not quite stable. Mom, are you doing okay up there? Are you eating? Sleeping? I'm fine. I just need to know about family names. I don't know anything about Grandma Josie's name. I barely remember her. I was 6 when she died. Why does it matter? Because I found something. Up on the mountain. Something that changes everything we thought we knew about our family. Found what? Tenny realizes she can't explain this over the phone. It sounds insane even to her, and she's seen it with her own eyes. Can you come visit? Soon? I need to show you something. Mom, I have a job. I have a life. I can't just drop everything because you're having some kind of family history obsession. The words sting, partly because they're not entirely wrong. Tenny is obsessed, but this is real, not fantasy. Michelle, I found a covered wagon on a mountain peak where no wagon should be. There was a skeleton inside, and I think I'm almost certain she was family. Your great-great-grandmother. Silence on the other end. Then, you found human remains and you're calling me instead of the police? I'll call them. I will. But I needed to understand first, to see if Mum, Michelle's voice is sharp now, call the sheriff. Right now, this isn't something you investigate yourself. If there are human remains, that's a legal matter. I know, but no buts. Promise me you'll call them today. Tenny closes her eyes. I promise. And Mom? Maybe talk to someone. A counselor or something. This doesn't sound like healthy behavior. After Michelle hangs up, Tenny sits holding the phone. The kitchen table is covered with photographs of a dead woman. Her daughter thinks she's losing her mind, and maybe she is. A little. Maybe grief and loneliness and too much time alone have bent her judgment. But the wagon is real, the skeleton is real, the locket with its photographs is real. She calls Vernon instead. He answers on the first ring. Tenny, you make it back okay from Tin Cup Meadow? I need to tell you something, and I need you not to judge me. Vernon is quiet for a moment. All right. I didn't go to Tin Cup Meadow. I went higher, to the peak Lucinda wrote about in her journal, and I found something. She tells him everything. The wagon, the skeleton, the locket, the date carved in wood. Vernon listens without interrupting. When she finishes, he's silent for so long, she thinks maybe he's hung up. Vernon, I'm here, just thinking. Another pause. You said the skeleton was small? Female? I think so. I'm not an expert, but yes. And herbs in the wagon? Herbalist supplies? Yes. Tenny, you know what you need to do, Michelle said to call the sheriff. She's right, but I know you're going to want to understand it first. So here's what I suggest. Call Pauline Kerr at the Historical Society. Tell her what you told me. She'll know where to start looking in the records. Then call the sheriff. They'll send someone up there. Probably take weeks to organize a recovery operation, given the location. You'll have time to do some research before they start asking questions you can't answer. It's good advice. Practical. Vernon has a way of cutting through emotional fog to what actually needs doing. Thank you. And Tenny, your daughter's worried about you. That's natural. But that doesn't mean you're wrong about this mattering. Sometimes the people who love us most are the ones who see what they're afraid to see, not what's actually there. After they hang up, Tenny looks up the Bitterroot County Historical Society's number. An elderly woman answers on the third ring. Historical Society, Pauline speaking. Miss Kerr? My name is Tenny Allard. Vernon Pitch suggested I call you. I've found something in the mountains that I think might be historically significant. What kind of something? Human remains. In a covered wagon, on a peak that should be inaccessible to wagons. And I think the woman who died there might be connected to my family. Pauline is quiet for a moment. When she speaks, her voice has shifted from polite to intensely interested. How soon can you come see me? And bring whatever documentation you have, photographs, notes, anything. I can come tomorrow morning. Make it 8. I'll put the coffee on. Tenny makes one more call before she loses her nerve. The Bitterroot County Sheriff's Office puts her through to dispatch. She reports finding human remains, gives the GPS coordinates, explains the location's difficulty. The dispatcher asks if she disturbed anything. Tenny admits to handling the locket. The dispatcher says someone will call her back within 24 hours to take a full statement. Then it's done. The official world knows. The process has started. Tenny should feel relieved, but instead she feels exposed, like she's handed over something precious to people who won't understand its weight. She makes dinner soup from a can, toast, and forces herself to eat. Then she opens Lucinda's journal to the entries from 1891, reading them with new eyes. The margin note from September that year says only, "The grief is unbearable. But it had to be this way. I pray she forgives me." Forgives what? Tenny traces the handwriting with her finger, wishing she could reach back through time and ask. But the dead keep their secrets, and the living can only gather evidence and guess. Pauline Kerr's Historical Society occupies a converted church on the edge of Derby, white clapboard with a bell tower that no longer holds a bell. Inside smells like old paper, leather, and dust, the smell of preserved time. Pauline herself is 79, rail-thin, with steel-grey hair in a braid down her back and reading glasses on a chain around her neck. She takes one look at Tenny standing in the doorway at precisely 8 o'clock and waves her in with impatient energy. "You must be the Allard girl. Come in, come in. Show me what you found." Tenny spreads the photographs across a wide wooden table that dominates the main room. Pauline studies them in silence, occasionally picking one up to examine it more closely, making small humming sounds that could mean anything. When she reaches the locket photographs, she goes completely still. "That's a tintype," she says finally. Mid-1880s, probably. Good quality, which means whoever commissioned it had money. She looks up at Tenny. "You said, you think this woman is related to you?" "I think she might be my great-great-grandmother's sister. Lucinda Allard had a younger sister named Temperance. She appears in early census records, then vanishes. Vanishes how? Just stops appearing. No death certificate, no marriage record after a certain point. Like she was erased." Pauline nods slowly. "Common enough for women back then, especially if there was scandal. Unmarried pregnancy, mental illness, anything that shamed the family, women disappeared. Sometimes voluntarily, sometimes not." She taps the photograph of the child. "And this girl? I don't know. The dates suggest she could be Temperance's daughter. Let's find out." Pauline moves to a filing cabinet, pulls out folders. "I keep copies of all the county birth and death records from territorial days. It's a hobby of mine, documenting the women who got written out of history." She spreads papers across another table. "Temperance Allard, you said, born 1867, according to the census." Pauline's fingers walk through documents with practiced efficiency. "Here, Temperance, Marie Allard, born the 3rd of November, 1867. Parents Thomas and Elizabeth, both deceased by 1875, according to notes here. Temperance appears in the 1870 census, living with her older sister Lucinda. Then the 1880 census, still with Lucinda. Both listed as herbalists." She pauses. "That's unusual. Most women didn't get listed by occupation. Whoever filled out this census thought what they did was important enough to note. Is there anything else?" Pauline keeps looking. "Here, church record from Street. Mary's Mission in Stevensville. March 1883. Temperance Allard, age 15, seeking shelter, accompanied by infant daughter." She looks up. There's no birth record for the daughter. That usually means either the birth wasn't reported, which was common in remote areas, or it was deliberately hidden. "Does it give the daughter's name?" "Josephine Temperance Allard." Pauline's finger moves down the page. "And there's a note here, added later in different handwriting. Girl refused to surrender child, left the 20th of March 1883, destination unknown." Tenny's hands are shaking. "Josephine, her grandmother's name. So Temperance had a baby at 14 or 15. Looks that way. And whoever the father was, he either couldn't or wouldn't marry her." Pauline's expression is grim. The mission would have pushed her to give the baby up for adoption. Respectable families wanted white infants. A 15-year-old with no husband wasn't considered fit to raise a child, no matter what she wanted. But she refused, and walked out into a Montana winter with a newborn. That's either brave or desperate or both. They keep searching. The paper trail is thin, but threads appear. A note in a missionary's diary from April 1883. "The Allard girl has not returned. I fear for her and the child." Nothing for months. Then, in Lucinda's own records, she kept ledgers of the people she treated, and the payments received an entry from May 1883. Tea and child arrived, both malnourished but alive, thank God. So, Temperance made it to her sister. Lucinda took them in. For 8 years, according to the timeline, they lived together. Then, in 1891, Temperance died on an impossible peak, and Josephine, what happened to Josephine? Pauline finds the answer in adoption records from 1894. Josephine Temperance Allard, age 12, adopted by Patrick Brennan and Lucinda Brennan. She looks at Tenny. "Your great-great-grandmother married Patrick Brennan in 1894 and legally adopted Josephine, giving her the Brennan name. So she raised her niece as her daughter. That's what the records show. And if Josephine was 12 in 1894, that means Temperance died when the girl was 9. Pauline sits back, old enough to remember her mother, but young enough that maybe the truth could be reshaped. Lucinda probably told her Temperance died of illness or accident, something natural. Not she gestures at the photographs, whatever actually happened on that mountain. Tenny feels pieces clicking into place. My grandmother never mentioned having a mother other than Lucinda. Never mentioned an aunt named Temperance. The whole story was buried. To protect her, Pauline says, think about it from Lucinda's perspective. Her sister dies mysteriously. She's raising Josephine alone. If the truth came out that Josephine was illegitimate, that her mother was unwed, that there was scandal, it would have followed the girl her whole life. Marriage prospects, social standing, everything would have been affected. Better to hide it. Better to let Temperance be forgotten so Josephine could have a normal life. It makes cruel sense. The kind of choice women had to make when the world judged them harshly for circumstances often beyond their control. But why die on the mountain? Why the wagon? That, Pauline says, is the question worth answering. And I think I know. Where to look next? She goes to a locked cabinet, returns with a leather-bound ledger book. These are county land records from 1880 to 1900, property transactions mostly. But sometimes there are notes about settlements, debts, disputes. She pages through carefully. The Garrett Mining Company owned most of the land around here back then. Big operation, politically connected. They're in here constantly buying claims, settling disputes, occasionally making payments that aren't clearly explained. She stops at a page, runs her finger down entries. Here, August 1891. Payment of $500 to private investigator Marcus Bell for resolution of family matter. Then, October 1891, another entry, Allard complication resolved. Asset recovered. Tenny leans in to read. The handwriting is precise, businesslike. What's an Allard complication? I don't know, but I know how to find out. Pauline makes a note. The Garrett family papers were donated to the Montana Historical Society in the 1972 when the company finally dissolved. They're archived in Helena. I have a friend there who owes me a favor. I'll ask her to pull anything related to the Allards, any payments or correspondence from 1880 to 1895. How long will that take? A few days, maybe a week. These things aren't digitized. Someone has to physically search through boxes. Pauline studies Tenny's face. You look like you haven't slept. I haven't much. This is going to get harder before it gets easier. Once you start pulling threads, you don't know what you'll unravel. Are you sure you want to keep going? Tenny thinks about the skeleton on the mountain, holding a locket with her daughter's face. About Lucinda's journal, notes heavy with guilt and grief. About her grandmother Josie, who lived 67 years, never knowing her own story. I'm sure. All right then. Pauline gathers the photographs, makes copies with an old scanner that whirs and clunks. I'll start. Digging. You should get some rest. And maybe talk to your family. This is their history too. On the drive home, Tenny calls David. He answers from what sounds like a coffee shop, background noise loud. Hey, Mom. What's up? I need to tell you something about our family. About where we come from. Okay. He sounds wary. Is this about your mountain thing? It's about your great-great-great-grandmother who died alone on a peak in 1891, and about why nobody ever told us she existed. David is quiet for a moment. That sounds heavy. It is, but it's also true, and I think you deserve to know. All right, tell me. So she does. She tells him about Temperance and Josephine, about the covered wagon and the locket, about records that show a teenage girl refusing to give up her baby and choosing to raise her alone. David listens without interrupting. When she finishes, he's quiet for a long time. So Grandma Josie's real mother wasn't Lucinda? No, Lucinda was her aunt. But she raised her, protected her, gave her a normal life. And nobody thought we should know this? I think they thought they were protecting Josie. Protecting all of us from shame that doesn't make sense anymore, but mattered terribly back then. David makes a sound that could be a laugh or a sigh. That's pretty intense, Mom. What are you going to do with it? I don't know yet. The sheriff is sending people to recover the remains. Pauline at the Historical Society is researching. I'm trying to understand why Temperance died the way she did. And Michelle thinks you're having a breakdown. Did she tell you that? She's worried. We both are. A little. Not because this isn't real, it sounds real, but because you seem really focused on people who've been dead for over a century instead of, living your own life. It's gently said, but it lands hard anyway. This is my life, David. Finding this, understanding where I come from, it matters to me. I know. Just don't lose yourself in it, okay? The past is important, but it's past. You're still here. That matters too. After they hang up, Tenny sits in the truck outside her cabin, hands on the steering wheel, trying to hold on to the truth of what he said. She's still here. The past is past. But the past made her, and understanding it feels like finally seeing the map of her own geography. 5 days later, Pauline calls. I found something. Can you come to the society? Tenny drives into town faster than she should, parks crooked, nearly runs up the steps. Pauline is waiting with papers spread across 3 tables, her expression somewhere between excited and troubled. The Garrett family kept meticulous records, she says without preamble. Too meticulous, in some cases. They documented things most people would want buried. She hands Tenny a photocopied letter dated March 1883. Read this. The handwriting is angular, aggressive-looking. Father, regarding the matter we discussed the Allard, the girl has given birth to a female child. She refuses all offers of financial settlement and will not name you as father. She has fled Stevensville with the infant. Mother insists we resolve this permanently before it damages your campaign for territorial legislature. I have hired men to locate her. They will handle it discreetly. Your son, Samuel Garrett. Tenny reads it twice. Samuel Garrett was the father, heir to the Garrett mining fortune, 24 years old in 1883. Unmarried, politically ambitious. Pauline pulls out a newspaper clipping. He died in 1,891 inches, a mining accident. Suspicious timing, but nothing was ever proven. What does handle it discreetly mean? I can only guess, but given what happened, I'd say they were looking for the child. Illegitimate offspring of a wealthy family were liabilities. Sometimes they were bought off, sometimes they were threatened, sometimes they simply disappeared. Tenny's stomach turns. Temperance was 15, he was 24. Yes, by today's standards that's criminal. By 1882 standards, it was unfortunate but not uncommon. The power differential was the same, though. Pauline's face is hard. Rich man, poor girl. She had no recourse. No one to believe her if she even tried to tell. So she ran. And Lucinda hid her. For 8 years. Pauline pulls out another document. The mission house, where Temperance first sought shelter, I found their full register. There's a note from the director to the Garrett family in April 1883, informing them that Temperance Allard had been there but left. Someone from the mission informed on her. The betrayal of it lands like a physical blow. Even the place meant to offer sanctuary sold her out. Did the Garretts find her? Not immediately. But look at this. Pauline shows her a ledger page from 1891. April 1891. Payment to Marcus Bell, investigator $500. Notation: locate Allard, woman and child. Then, August 1891, another payment. Subject located in Bitterroot region. And finally, October 1891, matter resolved, asset recovered. No further action required. Tenny does the math. Temperance died in September 1891, according to the date on the wagon, between the August notation and the October one. They found her. They found her. And then she was dead. Pauline pauses. There's one more thing. I found a fragment of a letter in Samuel Garrett's personal papers, written by him in March 1891, a few months before his death. It was never sent, just filed away with his private correspondence. She hands Tenny a photocopy. The handwriting is shakier than the earlier letter, as if written in haste or emotion. I dream of the child I will never know, the daughter whose face I have never seen. I tell myself she is better off without me, that my family would destroy her as they destroy everything they touch. But the guilt sits heavy. If anything happens to me, I want it known the girl is mine. Her mother's name was Tenny Allard. I loved her, though I was too weak to stand against my family. This is my confession and my shame. Tenny reads it 3 times. He loved her, or he was guilt-ridden. Hard to say which, or if both. Pauline sits down, suddenly looking her age. But here's what I think happened. Samuel Garrett got Temperance pregnant. His family wanted it buried. Temperance refused to give up the baby and ran. Lucinda hid them both for 8 years. Then in 1891, Samuel died, whether accident or something else, we'll never know. His family, paranoid about scandal, hired investigators to tie up loose ends. They found Temperance. And killed her? I don't think so. Look at the dates. They found her in August. She died in September. If they'd killed her outright, why the gap? And why take the time to note asset recovered? What asset? Tenny thinks about the wagon, the remote location. She went up there herself. She had to. There's no way they could have forced her up. That terrain. Exactly. So why did she go? They sit in silence, puzzling over it. Then Tenny remembers something. Wait, I found a journal at the wagon site. Mostly water-damaged, but there was one protected page. She pulls out her phone, scrolls through photographs until she finds the image of Temperance's journal entry. Here, September 1891. Josephine is safe with Elle. She will have the life I cannot give her. But I cannot stay and watch her grow into questions I cannot answer. Better she thinks me dead than knows the shame. I take the wagon where no one will find it, where I can see the whole territory one last time. This is my choice. I am free. Pauline reads over her shoulder. She chose to die, to protect Josephine. If the investigators couldn't find Temperance's body, they couldn't prove a connection to Josephine. And if Temperance was legally dead or missing, the threat to Lucinda and Josephine ended. She sacrificed herself. Pauline's voice is thick. Drove that wagon up impossible terrain God knows how, and died alone so her daughter could live safely. Tenny's eyes burn. How did she even get a wagon up there? That's the question, isn't it? Let me show you something. Pauline pulls out an old map, territorial survey from 1890. There was a mining road here, along this ridge. It was abandoned by 1893 when the mine played out, but in 1891 it would have been passable. If Temperance knew about it, if she was determined enough, she traces a route with her finger. It wouldn't have been easy, but it might have been possible. And the asset recovered? The wagon itself, probably, or whatever valuable items were in it. Samuel might have given her things, money, jewelry that his family wanted back. They took those, left her body. At that altitude, in that location, they knew it might never be found. From their perspective, problem solved. Tenny looks at the journal entry photograph on her phone. This is my choice. I am free. The words of a woman who had so few choices in her life that choosing her own death felt like liberation. She was 24 years old, same age as Samuel when he got her pregnant, but she paid the price, not him. That's how it worked. Pauline starts gathering the papers. I'm going to write this up properly, document it. She deserves to have her story told true. What about the Garrett family? Are there descendants? The direct line died out in the 1940 seconds. The company dissolved decades ago. There's no one left to protect, no reputation to salvage. Just history. She looks at Tenny, and your family's right to know where they come from. Tenny drives home slowly, her mind full of temperance. A 15-year-old girl who loved her baby more than her own safety. A woman who spent 8 years looking over her shoulder, knowing hunters were coming. Someone who chose how her story ended, even when every other choice had been taken from her. At the cabin, Tenny opens Lucinda's journal to the entry from September 1891. The grief is unbearable, but it had to be this way. I pray she forgives me. Now it makes terrible sense. Lucinda knew what Temperance was planning, maybe even helped, providing supplies, watching Josephine while her sister made the final journey. The guilt would have been crushing, letting someone you love die to save someone else you love. An impossible choice that Lucinda carried alone for the rest of her life. Tenny thinks about the sealed letter that Temperance left for Josephine, the one she photographed but hasn't yet examined closely. She pulls up the image, zooms in. The wax seal is still intact, stamped with a simple flower design. The paper beneath it is old, but preserved by its oilcloth wrapping. On the front, in Temperance's handwriting, to Josephine, when she is grown and can understand. But Josephine never saw it, never knew it existed. The letter stayed on the mountain with her mother's bones, waiting for someone who would never come. Until now, Tenny makes a decision. Tomorrow, she'll drive to her mother's assisted living facility. She needs to know what Josie, her grandmother, knew or didn't know about her own origins. Whether Lucinda ever told her the truth, or whether the secret died with both sisters, passed down only through documents and bones. But tonight, she sits with Lucinda's journal and reads every entry from 1891, letting the weight of old grief settle over her. Two sisters who loved each other and loved Josephine more than their own happiness. Women who made impossible choices with no good options. And a child who grew up safe and normal, never knowing the sacrifice that made her life possible. Vernon was right. Some gaps in the record are there to protect things. But now the protection has lasted over a century, and maybe the truth can finally be told without causing harm. Maybe it's time for the gaps to be filled. The assisted living facility is 3 hours away in Missoula, a bland building trying to look cheerful with flower boxes and bright paint. Tenny's mother lives on the 2nd floor in a room that holds 40 years of accumulated life, compressed into 400 square feet. She's 79, diagnosed with early-stage dementia 2 years ago. Some days she's sharp as ever. Some days she doesn't recognize her own daughter. Today is somewhere in between. She knows Tenny but seems surprised by the visit. It's not Sunday, is it? No, Mum, it's Thursday. I came because I needed to ask you about Grandma Josie. Her mother's face softens. Josephine. She was a wonderful woman. So calm, nothing rattled her. I always wished I'd inherited that instead of your father's nervous energy. Did she ever talk about her childhood? About her parents? Sometimes. She grew up on a homestead somewhere near Derby. Her mother, my grandmother Lucinda, was a kind of frontier doctor, treated people with plants, delivered babies. Josie was proud of that. Did she ever mention her father? Patrick Brennan? Her mother thinks about this, her expression distant. Not much. He died when she was young, 14 or 15, I think. There was just her and Lucinda after that. Why all the questions about ancient history? Tenny pulls out her phone, shows her mother the photograph of the locket. Do you recognize these people? Her mother studies the image, frowning. That's Josie, the little girl. I've seen this photograph before. She had it in a frame on her dresser my whole childhood. She looks at the other image. I don't know who the woman is. That's Tenny Allard. Lucinda's younger sister. Lucinda didn't have a sister that I ever heard of. She did, and I think I'm almost certain Temperance was Josie's real mother. That Lucinda raised her niece as her own daughter after Temperance died. Her mother stares at her, then at the phone, then back at her. That's quite a story. Where did you get this idea? I found Temperance's remains on a mountain peak, in a covered wagon. She died there in 1891, when Josie would have been 9 years old. The look her mother gives her is the same one Michelle used over the phone, concern mixed with doubt. Tenny, sweetheart, are you feeling all right? You've been under a lot of stress. I'm not making this up. The sheriff's department is recovering the remains. The Historical Society has documentation, birth records, church records, everything. Her mother is quiet for a long moment. Then she says, very carefully, even if what you're saying is true, why does it matter? Everyone involved is long dead. Because Josie never knew. Because her whole life she thought Lucinda was her mother and never knew her real mother died on a mountain to protect her. Don't you think she deserved to know the truth? Maybe she did know. Maybe Lucinda told her when she was older and she just never told us. Or maybe her mother's voice gets firmer. Maybe Lucinda made the choice not to tell her because the truth would have hurt more than helped. Have you considered that? Tenny has, actually. Late at night, when she can't sleep, she's wrestled with whether uncovering this serves any purpose beyond satisfying her own need to understand. I think people have a right to their own history. And I think sometimes the kindest thing is to let the dead rest. Her mother looks tired suddenly. Tenny, I know you're trying to find something up there in those mountains. Purpose, maybe, or peace, or I don't know what. But digging up sad old stories about women who had hard lives, what does that give you? Connection, understanding of where I come from. You come from me, and I came from Josie. What happened before that is just names on paper. She reaches out, takes Tenny's hand. I worry about you up there alone. Your marriage ended. Your job ended, and instead of rebuilding, you went to live in the middle of nowhere chasing ghosts. That's not living, honey. That's hiding. The words hurt because they're not entirely wrong. Tenny has been hiding, in a way, but she's also been seeking. The two aren't mutually exclusive. I'm not trying to chase ghosts. I'm trying to honor them. Then honor them by living your own life well, by being happy. That's the best thing you can do for women who didn't get that chance. They sit in silence, holding hands across a gap that's about more than just the question of what to do with family secrets. Her mother represents one view that the past is past, that stirring it up serves no one. Tenny represents another, that understanding where you come from matters, that truth has value even when it's painful. Before she leaves, her mother says, there's a box of Josie's things in my storage unit. If you want to go through it, you can. The key is in my desk drawer. Maybe you'll find something that helps. The storage unit is in the basement, musty and crowded, with decades of accumulated items that couldn't fit in the small apartment. Box 1-2, marked Josephine, contains photograph albums, costume jewelry, recipe cards, and at the bottom, wrapped in tissue paper, a leather-bound book. Tenny's hands shake as she opens it. It's a journal, similar to Lucinda's but younger-looking, less worn. The handwriting inside is careful, slightly uneven, a child's hand becoming an adult's. The first entry is dated 1894. My new mother Lucinda says I should keep a journal like she does. She says it helps to write things down when you're sad or confused. I am both today. Tenny flips through pages. Entries about learning to identify plants, about Patrick, warm, kind mentions, about daily life on the homestead. And then, dated 1899, when Josephine would have been 17, I found something today. Letters hidden in Mother's trunk. They mentioned someone named Temperance. When I asked Mother who that was, she looked like I'd struck her. She said Temperance was her sister, who died long ago, and we would not speak of her. But one letter said, "Your daughter, not your niece." I am afraid of what this means. The next entry is 2 weeks later. "Mother told me the truth today," she cried. "I have never seen her cry before. Temperance was my real mother. She died when I was 9. Everything I thought I knew about myself is wrong. I don't know what to feel. Angry, grateful, sad, all of it, I suppose. And a month after that, I have decided to let Temperance rest in peace. Mother said she loved me enough to die for me. That is more than most people get. I will honor that by living well, which is what she wanted. I will not dig up the past. Some things are better left buried." Tenny sits on the concrete floor of the storage unit, reading her grandmother's decision from over a century ago. Josie knew. She chose not to pursue it. Chose to let the story stay buried, to honor Temperance through silence rather than investigation. And here Tenny is, digging it. All back up. Going against her grandmother's explicit wish. Is she honoring Temperance, or violating the very choice Temperance died to make, that Josephine should have a normal life, unburdened by tragedy? She photographs every page of Josie's journal, then rewraps it carefully and puts it back. On the drive home, her mind circles the same questions. What right does she have to tell this story? Who benefits from the truth being known? But another voice, quieter, insists. Temperance's story matters. She wasn't just a cautionary tale or a family secret to be buried. She was a person who made impossible choices with courage and love. Doesn't she deserve to be remembered as herself, not just as a gap in the record? By the time Tenny reaches her cabin, it's dark. She sits in the truck, looking at the mountains silhouetted against the stars. Somewhere up there, Temperance's bones are waiting for recovery. Somewhere in the historical record, her story exists in fragments. And somewhere, in Tenny's own heart, a decision is forming about what to do with what she knows. Vernon's truck pulls up beside hers. He gets out, leans against his door. "You look like you've had a day." "I found my grandmother's journal. She knew about Temperance. Lucinda told her when she was 17. And she decided to let it stay buried. Said some things are better left in the past." Vernon nods slowly. "And you're wondering if you should respect that?" "Yes. Can I tell you something my grandmother told me? The stories that want to stay buried don't find people to dig them up. The ones that surface do so because they need telling. Maybe your grandmother's generation needed the silence, but maybe yours needs the truth. How do I know which? You don't. You just do your best to honor everyone involved, the living and the dead, and trust that the story will find its right shape." He straightens up, heading for his truck. "The sheriff called me, by the way. They're planning the recovery operation for next week. They want you to guide them up there." After he leaves, Tenny goes inside, opens Lucinda's journal one more time, reads the entry from 1910, written nearly 20 years after Temperance's death. "I have kept my promise. Josephine knows nothing of her mother's suffering. She believes her mother died of fever when she was young, a merciful lie. She is happy, married, a mother herself now. She does not need the burden of truth, but I carry it. I carry Temperance's choice, her courage, her final morning when she kissed Josephine goodbye and walked into the mountains. I knew what she was going to do. I tried to stop her, but she said, 'They will always look for me. This is the only way she is free. I have told no one, but God knows. And perhaps someday someone will find her and understand she was not lost. She knew exactly where she was going. Someday, someone.'" Tenny closes the journal, feeling the weight of being that someone, of this being the someday Lucinda imagined. The story wants telling, she's sure of that now. But it has to be told right, with dignity, with context, with the understanding that the choices these women made weren't weak or shameful, but were acts of fierce love in a world that gave them few options. She'll help with the recovery. She'll work with Pauline to document everything properly. And then she'll decide how much of the truth needs to be public and how much can rest privately with family. Some stories are for everyone. Some are just for the people who carry the blood and the memory. Either way, temperance will not be forgotten. That much Tenny can promise. The sheriff's recovery team consists of 4 people, 2 deputies, a medical examiner, and a Forest Service specialist who handles difficult terrain recoveries. Tenny meets them at the trailhead at dawn, and they look at her like they're not entirely convinced she's reliable. The lead deputy, a woman named Kowalski, who moves with military precision, asks pointed questions about the route, the condition of the remains, whether Tenny disturbed anything besides the locket. "I touched as little as possible," Tenny says. "Photographed everything in place before handling anything." "Good." Kowalski shoulders her pack. "We'll do this properly. Full documentation, evidence collection. If there's any question about cause of death, we need to preserve that. The hike takes 2 days, same as when Tenny did it alone. The team is efficient, experienced, but even they struggle with the altitude and terrain. By the time they reach the wagon site, everyone is exhausted. Kowalski sets up a perimeter, and the medical examiner begins his careful work. Tenny stands back, watching them photograph and measure and carefully catalogue. It feels violating somehow, even though she knows it's necessary. These are strangers handling Temperance's bones, putting her in bags and boxes, reducing her final resting place to evidence and documentation. The medical examiner is a thin man named Dr. Chu, who treats the skeleton with surprising gentleness. He examines each bone, makes notes, photographs from multiple angles. After an hour, he calls Kowalski over and they have a quiet conversation. Then Kowalski waves Tenny closer. Dr. Chu has some observations, things that don't quite add up. The medical examiner adjusts his glasses. The skeleton is definitely female, age approximately 20 to 25 at time of death. That matches your timeline. But there are anomalies. First, there's no evidence of trauma, no broken bones, no signs of violence. People who die of exposure usually show certain patterns. I'm not seeing them here. What are you seeing? Nothing. That's the problem. The bones are remarkably intact, well preserved by the altitude and dry conditions. But there's no obvious cause of death, no disease markers, no injury. People who die naturally in their 20s usually have something: infection, childbirth complications, tuberculosis. This woman appears to have been healthy. Tenny frowns. So how did she die? I can't say definitively without more testing, but if I had to guess, poison or overdose. Something that killed her but left no trace on bone. The word hangs in the air. Poison. You're saying she was murdered? I'm saying it's a possibility we need to investigate. Dr. Chu gestures at the wagon. But here's the other thing. We found these. He holds up an evidence bag containing dried plant matter. They were scattered around the body. I'm not a botanist, but some of these look deliberately placed, not just naturally occurring here. Tenny takes the bag, examines the contents carefully. Her training kicks in. This is digitalis, foxglove, and this hemlock, both deadly in the right doses. She looks up. These aren't native to this altitude. Someone brought them here. The deceased? Maybe. Or someone else. But even as she says it, pieces are clicking together. Herbalist supplies in the wagon. Temperance's training from Lucinda. Knowledge of plants and their properties. She knew what these did. She would have known exactly how much to take. Kowalski's expression shifts. You're suggesting suicide. I'm suggesting she made a choice. Tenny thinks about the journal entry. This is my choice. I am free. If investigators were hunting her, if she knew they'd eventually find her no matter where she hid, maybe she decided to control how the story ended. Dr. Chu nods slowly. That would explain the lack of struggle, the peaceful positioning of the remains, and it would explain why she came to such a remote location. Privacy for a final act. They continue the recovery, but the mood has shifted. This isn't just a historical death, it's a tragedy with intention behind it. By late afternoon, they've documented everything, carefully packed the remains, prepared for the difficult descent. Kowalski asks Tenny if she wants to take any personal items before they're catalogued as evidence. Just one thing, if it's allowed. Tenny points to the sealed letter addressed to Josephine. That was meant for my grandmother. She never received it. I'd like to honor that. Kowalski considers, then nods. We'll photograph it in place, document the seal. Then you can take it. But if there's anything relevant to the investigation we need to know, there won't be. It's personal. A mother's letter to her daughter. They photograph the letter from every angle, document the unbroken seal, note its position in the wagon. Then Kowalski hands it to Tenny. The paper is heavier than she expected, the wax seal impressed with a simple flower bitterroot, she realizes. Montana's state flower, the one she and Lucinda both found on these mountains. That night, camped at the lower elevation, Tenny sits apart from the team and carefully opens the letter. The seal breaks cleanly. The paper inside is densely written in Temperance's neat hand, dated the 15th of September, 1891. My dearest Josephine, if you are reading this, you are grown enough to understand what I could not tell you as a child. I have always intended for you to know the truth, but only when you were strong enough to carry it. Your father was Samuel Garrett, eldest son of the Garrett Mining Company. He was not a bad man, but he was a weak one. When I told him I carried his child, he offered money for me to disappear. I refused. His family tried to take you from me by force. That is why I ran. That is why Lucinda hides us. They are powerful, and they want no evidence of you. They see you not as a person, but as a threat to their position. I write this because they have found me. Men came to Lucinda's homestead asking questions. They did not find me. I was gathering plants 3 miles away, but they will return. It is only a matter of time. Lucinda wants to send you east, to relatives in Minnesota where you would be safe, but where I could not follow. She is probably right. But I cannot bear to watch you disappear from my life. So, I am making a different choice. I am taking this wagon, a gift from your father in better days, to a place where no one will find it. By the time you read this, I will have been gone long enough that you will have grieved and moved forward. Lucinda will tell you I died of fever or accident. Let her. She is protecting you, as she has always protected us both. But know this truth. I chose to leave because I love you, because every day I stayed, I put you in danger. The Garrett family will never stop looking for me, but if I am gone, truly, completely gone, they will have no reason to hurt you. You will be Lucinda's daughter, legitimate and safe. You will have the life I could not give you. I am not sorry for keeping you. You have been the greatest joy of my short life. Every moment of hardship was worth it to watch you grow, to teach you about plants and stars, and how to be brave. You are so brave, my girl, braver than I ever was. Do not mourn me long. Live well, love freely, let yourself be happy. That is the gift I most want to give you, a life unburdened by my mistakes. There is one more thing you should know. Your father died 3 months ago. The mining accident they reported was no accident. I know this because one of the men who found me told me, thinking to hurt me with the information. He said the Garrett family arranged it, that Samuel had become a liability with his drinking and his guilty conscience. They killed their own son to protect their reputation. I tell you this not to burden you with more sadness, but so you will know. You come from a man who, despite his weakness, felt remorse, who left a letter confessing his love for me and acknowledging you as his daughter. That letter is filed with his papers, and someday, perhaps long after the family's power has faded, it may surface. When it does, you will have proof of your lineage, if you ever want or need it. But I hope you never need it. I hope you live as Josephine Brennan, or whatever name you choose, free from the weight of the Garrett legacy. They took much from me, but they cannot have you. Be well, my daughter. Be happy. Be free. That is all any mother truly wants. With all my love. Your mother, Tenny Allard. Tenny reads the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. This is what Lucinda knew and carried alone. This is what Josephine might have learned if the letter had reached her. And this revelation about Samuel Garrett's death changes everything. She thinks about the ledger entries Pauline found. The last one, dated October 1891. Allard matter resolved. If Samuel was killed in March and Temperance died in September, the family spent those 6 months tying up loose ends. Temperance was the final one. But she beat them. She chose her death on her terms, in a place of beauty, with dignity and tact, and she left a letter that documented their crimes, even knowing it might never be found. The next morning, Tenny shows the letter to Kowalski. You need to see this. It alleges murder. Samuel Garrett's death in 1891. Kowalski reads it, her expression darkening. This is 130 years old. Everyone involved is long dead. There's no one to prosecute, but the record should reflect it. The Garrett family got away with murder, multiple murders, if you count Temperance's death as the result of their actions. That should be known. It will be in the report. But beyond that, Kowalski shakes her head. This is history now, not active investigation. The best we can do is document it accurately and let historians decide what it means. It's not enough, but it's something. They descend the mountain carrying Temperance's bones, her letter, the evidence of her final act. At the trailhead, a hearse is waiting to transport the remains to the medical examiner's office in Missoula. Tenny watches them load. The bag containing Temperance, and feels like she's saying goodbye to someone she's known her whole life. Vernon is waiting by her truck. How'd it go? She took poison, digitalis or hemlock or both. She killed herself to protect Josephine from the Garrett family. Vernon absorbs this quietly. That's a hard way to love someone. It's the only way she had left. Tenny gets in the truck, sits with her hands on the wheel. Vernon, do you think it's possible to make peace with the dead? I think the dead are already at peace. It's the living who struggle with it. He leans in the window. But I also think sometimes bringing truth to light helps both. The dead get remembered true, and the living get to stop carrying secrets that aren't theirs. Tenny nods. She knows what she has to do now. The letter needs to reach the family, her family. Michelle and David deserve to know where they come from. And Temperance's story deserves to be told, not as scandal or shame, but as testament. To a woman who loved so fiercely she died for it. Tenny spends a week organizing everything. The photographs, the documents from Pauline, copies of the historical records, Temperance's letter, Josephine's journal excerpts. She creates a timeline on poster board, mapping out the years from 1882 to 1910, noting births, deaths, key events. It covers her entire kitchen table and spills onto the floor. This is Temperance's life, reduced to dates and facts, but she wants it to be accurate before she presents it to her children. Michelle calls on Tuesday. Mom, the sheriff's office contacted me. They said you found human remains and there's been an investigation. Why didn't you tell me it was this serious? I tried to. You didn't want to hear it. A long pause. You're right. I'm sorry. I thought you were fixating on something that didn't matter. But if the sheriff's involved, if there are actual remains... She stops. Can I come see? I have next weekend free. Yes, please come. Bring David if he can make it. David can't. He has a work deadline, but he promises to video call during the weekend. Michelle arrives Friday evening, pulling up to the cabin in her sensible sedan, looking out of place among the pines. She hugs Tenny carefully, the way you hug someone you're worried about, and then sees the kitchen table. Oh my God, Mom. She steps closer, examining the timeline, the photographs. Her hand goes to her mouth when she sees the image of Temperance's skeleton in the wagon. That's her. That's our great-great-great-grandmother. Sit down, Tenny says. Let me tell you the whole story. She does, starting with finding the journal and ending with the letter. Michelle listens without interrupting, her expression shifting from skepticism to shock to something softer, grief, maybe, or connection to people she never knew existed. When Tenny finishes, Michelle picks up the photograph of the locket. She looks like you. The face shape, the eyes. She looks like all of us. That's what family is. Features that persist through generations, connecting us to people we never met. And she died to protect Grandma Josie? She did, because staying alive would have put Josephine in danger. The Garrett family was hunting her, and the only way to end that was to disappear completely. Michelle studies the timeline, tracing the dates with her finger. Samuel Garrett was murdered by his own family. According to Temperance's letter, I haven't been able to confirm it independently. The official record says mining accident. But given what we know about the family, about how they operated, it's plausible. That's horrifying. It is. And it's our history. Tenny pulls out the sealed letter, or what remains of it after she carefully opened it. This was meant for Josephine. She never got it. But I think we should honor it by reading it together, by knowing what Temperance wanted her daughter to know. They read the letter. Side by side, Michelle's hand gripping Tenny's tighter with each paragraph. When they finish, Michelle wipes her eyes. She was so young. 24 is so young to die. The same age as Samuel when he got her pregnant. But he got to be weak and guilty and drunk, and she got to be brave and dead. That's what the world gave women back then. Is that why this matters so much to you? Because you see yourself in her? The question catches Tenny off guard. She thinks about it honestly. Maybe, I don't know. I see a woman who made choices in a world that gave her very few, who loved someone, Josephine, more than her own life. And I see how that story was buried, how she was erased from family memory to protect Josephine's reputation. It feels important to say she existed, she mattered. Her choices had meaning. Michelle nods slowly. So what do we do with all this? That's what I wanted to talk to you about. I think we should write it up properly. Not as scandal, but as family, history. Pauline at the Historical Society wants to include it in the county archives, but I won't do that without your blessing. This is your history too. You have a say in whether it becomes public. Will people judge us? Judge her? Some might. Some people will always judge women for having sex outside marriage, for having children they're not supposed to have. But those people's opinions don't matter. What matters is that we know the truth, and we honor it. They spend Saturday going through everything in detail. Michelle asks good questions about the timeline, about the evidence, about how Tenny can be certain of various facts. It's her practical nature asserting itself, making sure the story holds up to scrutiny. By evening, she's convinced. This is real, this happened, and you're right, she shouldn't be forgotten. Michelle picks up the photograph of Temperance from the locket. I want to show this to my kids someday. Tell them about their great-great-great-great-grandmother who was brave enough to die for love. Sunday morning, they video call David. He's in his apartment in Seattle, looking skeptical until Tenny starts showing him documents. By the time she gets to Temperance's letter, his expression has changed completely. That's one hell of a family secret. It was. But it doesn't have to be anymore. What about the Garrett family? Are there still descendants? Pauline checked. The main line died out. There are some distant cousins with the name, but they're not connected to the mining company or the original family. They've probably never heard of any of this. David leans back in his chair. So we could go public with it, the murder, the cover-up, all of it, and there's no one left to hurt? Except our family's reputation, maybe. Some people might think we're sensationalizing or attention-seeking. Let them think that. This is truth. Truth matters. He pauses. Mom, I'm proud of you, for digging into this, for not letting it stay buried. It must have been lonely work. It was. But hearing him say that makes some of the loneliness retroactively bearable. I had help. Vernon, Pauline, and now you too. They spend another hour discussing what comes next. Michelle suggests creating a family website, a place to archive the documents and tell the story properly. David offers to help build it. Tenny mentions that Pauline wants to write an article for the Montana Historical Society quarterly journal. They all agree that sounds appropriate, academic, respectful, focused on the history rather than sensation. Before they sign off, David says, "Mom, one more thing. You said earlier that this mattered because Temperance was erased and you wanted to honor her by making sure she was remembered. But I think maybe there's another reason." "What's that?" "I think you needed to know that you come from strong women, that when the world got hard and choices were impossible, the women in the family didn't give up. They made the best decisions they could with the options they had. Maybe that's what you needed to find after the divorce and the job loss and everything falling apart. Evidence that survival is in your DNA." Tenny can't speak for a moment. Then, "You might be right." After David signs off, Michelle makes lunch while Tenny sits on the porch with Lucinda's journal. She opens it to the last entry, dated 1910, and reads Lucinda's words about carrying the secret alone, about hoping someday someone would find Temperance and understand. "I found her," Tenny says aloud to the mountain. "And I understand. You did what you thought was right. You protected Josephine. And now, more than a century later, we're making sure Temperance is remembered with the dignity she deserves." The wind moves through the pines, and for a moment, Tenny feels a sense of not closure exactly, but completion. The circle is closing. The story that began in 1882 with a 15-year-old, the girl's pregnancy, and ended in 1891 with her death on a mountain, is finally being told true. Michelle joins her on the porch with sandwiches. "What are you thinking about?" "I'm thinking about what Vernon said, that some gaps in the record are there to protect things, but that sometimes the protection needs to end so truth can be told. I think we're at that moment. The protection has lasted long enough. Do you think Grandma Josie would approve? She explicitly said in her journal that some things are better left buried. I don't know, but I think Temperance would approve. She left that letter for a reason. She wanted the truth documented, even if it took over a century to surface. They eat in comfortable silence, looking out at the mountains where Temperance died and where Tenny found her. The sun is warm, the breeze gentle. It's the kind of day that makes you grateful to be alive, and Tenny thinks about Temperance's last days, whether she had moments like this, whether she looked at these same mountains with regret or peace or both. "Mom?" Michelle's voice is soft. "Thank you for doing this, for caring enough about family to dig into the hard parts. I know I didn't understand at first, but I do now. This matters." Tenny takes her daughter's hand. "It does. And having you here supporting this, it means everything." That evening, after Michelle leaves for the drive back to Missoula, Tenny sits at her kitchen table and begins writing. Not the academic article, Pauline will handle that. This is personal. A letter to Temperance, the kind of response the woman never got in life. "Dear Temperance, I found you. I found your wagon, your bones, your letter. I found the truth that was buried for over a century, and I'm making sure it's told right. You were not shameful. You were not weak. You made the hardest choice a mother can make to leave so your child could stay safe. And it worked. Josephine lived a long, happy life. She married, had children, knew grandchildren. She was loved and respected. Your sacrifice gave her that, but you deserve to be remembered too, not just as the woman who died, but as the woman who lived. Who loved Samuel despite the impossibility of it, who kept Josephine against all pressure to give her up, who chose death over surrender. That's strength, not shame. Your great-great-great-granddaughter found you. She won't let you be forgotten again. With respect and recognition, Tenny. She doesn't know who this letter is for, herself maybe, or the universe, or just the need to close the loop of communication across time. But writing it feels right, feels like the last piece of the puzzle clicking into place. Tomorrow, she'll start working with Pauline on the formal documentation. She'll help write the article, provide the photographs, make sure every fact is accurate and every conclusion supported. She'll do the academic work of turning discovery into knowledge. But tonight, she's just a woman who found her ancestor and wanted to say, "I see you. I know what you did, and I honor it." The morning after placing the marker, Tenny woke before dawn in her tent near the wagon site. Her body ached from the climb, from the digging, from the weight of everything she'd carried, both physical and emotional. But there was a lightness in her chest that hadn't been there before. She unzipped the tent and crawled out into the cold mountain air. Michelle and Vernon were already awake, sitting by the remains of last night's fire, speaking in low voices that didn't disturb the profound silence around them. "Mom." Michelle looked up, her face still showing traces of yesterday's tears. "I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about her." Tenny sat beside her daughter, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. "Me too." "Do you think she knew?" Michelle asked. "When she was dying up here, do you think she knew that someday someone would find her? That her story would be told?" Tenny looked at the marker they'd placed, standing straight and strong against the morning sky. "I think she hoped. I think that's what the letter was, for a message in a bottle, thrown across time. She couldn't know if Josephine would ever read it, but she wrote it anyway. That's an act of hope." Vernon poured coffee from his thermos and handed cups to both of them. "We should get moving soon. Storm's coming in tomorrow. Want to be off this peak before it hits." But Tenny wasn't quite ready to leave. She walked over to the wagon one more time, placed her hand on the weathered wood. "I'm going to tell your story," she said quietly. "Not just in an archive, but properly, so people understand what you did, what you sacrificed." The wind picked up, whistling through the wagon's broken frame, and for a moment it almost sounded like a voice, like an answer. They broke camp efficiently, decades of outdoor experience between the three of them, making the work quick and smooth. As they prepared for the descent, Tenny took one last look at the site. The marker stood visible against the rocks, the carved letters deep enough to last for years, maybe decades. Eventually the wood would weather and crack, would return to the mountain. But for now, Temperance had a name, had a place, had recognition. That would have to be enough. The hike down was quiet, each of them lost in their own thoughts. Tenny found herself thinking about all the choices that had led to this moment. Temperance's choice to keep Josephine, Lucinda's choice to hide them. Temperance's final choice to lead the Garretts away, to die alone so her daughter could live free. And Tenny's own choices, to move to the cabin, to follow Lucinda's trails, to not give up when the mystery deepened. Every choice had mattered. Every decision had led to the next, a chain of cause and effect stretching across 130 years. They reached the trailhead late in the afternoon. Michelle's car was covered in pine needles, Vernon's truck dusty from the dirt road. They stood in the parking area for a moment, none of them quite ready to part ways, to return to the ordinary world. "What happens now?" Michelle asked, voicing the question they were all thinking. Tenny adjusted her pack straps, considering, "Now I document it properly, write it down, organize the evidence, create something that will last." For who? For anyone who wants to know. For historians. For family members who come after us. For anyone who needs to know that women like Temperance existed, that they were brave, that their stories matter. Vernon nodded approvingly. "That's good work. Important work." Michelle hugged her mother, holding on longer than usual. "Thank you for bringing me. I needed to see this, to understand. I'm glad you came." After Michelle drove away and Vernon headed to his own truck, Tenny stood alone in the parking area for a few minutes more. She could see the peak from here, distant but visible, the place where she'd found Temperance, and left her marked and remembered. The drive back to the cabin was peaceful. The late afternoon sun turned the aspens golden, and the road wound through valleys that Lucinda and Temperance had both known. Tenny felt them with her, these women whose blood ran in her veins, whose choices had made her life possible. At home she unpacked slowly, carefully. The locket went into a safe place, the documents into archival folders. Lucinda's journal went back on the shelf, where it had lived for 3 years, its mysteries finally solved. Then Tenny made coffee, sat at her kitchen table, and opened her laptop. She created a new document and stared at the blank screen for a long moment, thinking about how to begin. Finally, she started typing. Sometimes the hardest journeys aren't about finding new places, they're about finding the pieces of ourselves we left behind. The words came steadily after that. Flowing from her fingers to the screen, she wrote about the discovery, impossible wagon and the skeleton inside. She wrote about the locket and the photographs that had sparked recognition. She wrote about Temperance, about Josephine, about Lucinda's careful protection and Temperance's final sacrifice. She wrote through the evening and into the night, stopping only to make more coffee, to stretch her stiff shoulders, to look out the window at the mountains that held so many secrets. By midnight, she had the framework, the story, beginning to take shape. Not complete yet, there was so much more to add, so much more research to organize, but begun. Started. The first words of Temperance's resurrection laid down on digital paper. Tenny saved the file, backed it up, then sat staring at the screen. She'd done it. She'd found Temperance, understood her story, and begun the process of making sure she'd never be forgotten again. It wasn't everything. The Garrett family would never face justice for what they'd done. Samuel's death would remain officially an accident. The cruelty Temperance had faced would never be fully acknowledged or apologized for. But her name would live on, her story would be told. And that was something. That was enough. 3 days later, Tenny drove to the Historical Society with a box full of carefully organized materials. She'd spent those days writing, organizing, cross-referencing every piece of evidence she'd collected. The result was a comprehensive archive, photographs, document copies, genealogical charts, and a complete written narrative that told Temperance's story from beginning to end. Pauline met her at the door, excitement visible in her eyes. "You finished it?" "I finished it." Tenny set the box on the conference table. "Everything's here. The full story, fully documented." They spent the morning going through the materials together. Pauline handled each item with the reverence of someone who understood exactly how rare and precious complete women's histories were. She read through Tenny's narrative slowly, stopping occasionally to ask questions or make notes. "This is extraordinary," Pauline said when she finished. "You've created something really significant here. Not just for your family, but for anyone studying frontier women's history." "That's what I hoped." Tenny pulled out the locket, still in its protective case. "This should be preserved properly. I don't know if it belongs in a museum or—" "It belongs here," Pauline said firmly, "with the rest of the archive. It's part of the story, part of the evidence." She looked at Tenny seriously. "You understand you're donating all of this? Making it public record?" "I understand. That's what I want. Temperance's story hidden for long enough." Pauline nodded slowly. "Then let's make it official." They filled out paperwork, signed donation forms, created a detailed inventory. With each signature, Tenny felt a weight lifting. The story wasn't hers alone anymore. It belonged to history now, preserved and protected, for anyone who wanted to know. "I want to create an exhibit," Pauline said, "something special. We'll display the photographs, tell the story properly, maybe even organize a memorial ceremony at the peak. You think people would be interested? Are you kidding? This is exactly the kind of history people need to see. A complete, documented story of a frontier woman's courage. It's powerful, Tenny. Really powerful." After the official donation was complete, Pauline made coffee and they sat in her office, looking out at the street. The Historical Society occupied a quiet corner of town, far from the tourist areas, but Pauline had made it a vital part of the community's memory. "What will you do now?" Pauline asked. "Keep researching? There might be other family stories hidden in the records," Tenny considered. "Maybe, but I think I need to step back for a while. This consumed me for months. I need to remember there's more to life than chasing ghosts, even important ghosts. Even them." Tenny smiled. "But I'm glad I did it. Glad I found her. Glad I told her story. She deserved that." "She did. And you did right by her." That evening, Tenny called Michelle. "It's done. The archive is complete, donated to the Historical Society. Temperance's story is officially preserved. How do you feel?" "Relieved. Satisfied. A little empty, maybe. I've been so focused on this for so long that I'm not sure what comes next." Michelle laughed gently. "You could try living in the present for a change. Radical concept, I know. When did you get so wise?" "I learned from watching you chase down a 130-year-old mystery. If you can do that, I can learn to give decent advice." They talked for another hour about Michelle's kids, about Thanksgiving plans, about ordinary things that had nothing to do with dead relatives or frontier tragedies. It felt good, normal, like Tenny was reconnecting with the present after months of living in the past. After hanging up, Tenny sat on her porch with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, watching the stars come out. The same stars Temperance had seen on her last night alive. The same stars Lucinda had navigated by during her wilderness travels. The same stars that would be there long after Tenny herself was gone. There was something comforting in that continuity, in knowing that while individual lives were brief and often tragic, the bigger patterns continued. Stories got told or didn't. People were remembered or forgotten. But the mountains endured, the stars kept turning, and life moved forward, whether anyone noticed or not. Vernon's truck pulled up the drive, headlights cutting through the darkness. He got out carrying 2 bottles of beer and joined Tenny on the porch without asking if he was welcome. That was their relationship, comfortable enough not to need constant invitation. "Heard you finished the archive," he said, handing her a beer. "News travels fast in small towns. Pauline's excited about it. Says it's the most complete women's history she's ever seen." It took long enough. They sat in silence for a while, drinking beer and watching the night. Finally, Vernon said, "You did good work, Tenny. Really good. That girl Temperance, she's not forgotten anymore. That matters." "I know. But now you need to focus on your own life. Can't spend all your time in the past." "I know that too." Tenny took a sip of beer. "I've been thinking about getting back into teaching, maybe part-time at the community college. Botany, field identification, something that keeps me connected to the outdoors, but also to living people." Vernon nodded approvingly. "That sounds right. You've got knowledge worth sharing. And I might write a book," Michelle suggested it. "Not just the academic archive, but something for general readers, so more people can know Temperance's story. Even better, world needs more true stories about brave women." They finished their beers in comfortable silence. When Vernon left, Tenny stayed on the porch a little longer, thinking about everything that had happened. The discovery, the research, the climb to place the marker, the final documentation. It had been a journey not just through mountains, but through time, through family history, through her own grief and loneliness. And at the end of it, she'd found something more valuable than she'd expected. Not just Temperance's story, but her own renewed sense of purpose. Her own understanding of where she came from and what mattered. That was worth everything. 6 months after finding Temperance, Tenny stood in the Historical Society's main exhibition hall, looking at a wall display that told the story she'd uncovered. Photographs of the wagon, the locket, the documents. A timeline tracing Temperance's life from birth to death. Excerpts from both Temperance's and Lucinda's journals. And at the center, enlarged and carefully restored, the photograph from the locket Temperance at 24, looking directly at the camera with those deep-set eyes that Tenny saw in the mirror every morning. "She looks like you," Michelle said, standing beside her mother. "I never really saw it before, but in this light, the resemblance is incredible." "Stubborn bloodline," Tenny said with a smile. "Vernon keeps reminding me." The exhibit had opened that morning to a surprisingly large crowd. Local historians, genealogy enthusiasts, university professors who specialized in women's studies, even a journalist from the State Historical Magazine who wanted to write a feature article. Pauline had done an excellent job with the presentation, respectful, thorough, unflinching about the harder parts of the story. A placard near the entrance read, "Tenny Allard, a story of courage, sacrifice, and survival in the Montana Territory." Below that, a dedication. "This exhibit is made possible by the research of Tenny Allard, Temperance's great-great-granddaughter, who refused to let this story remain buried." Tenny had given a brief talk earlier, explaining how she'd found the wagon, pieced together the evidence, and come to understand Temperance's final choice. She'd kept it simple, factual, letting the story speak for itself. The audience had been moved. She'd seen tears, heard the quiet murmurs of recognition when she explained how Temperance had died to protect her daughter. Now, as the crowd thinned and people began to leave, a woman in her 60s approached Tenny hesitantly. "Excuse me, Miss Allard? I'm sorry to bother you, but I think we might be related." Tenny turned, surprised. "Related how?" "My name is Karen Brennan. My great-grandmother was Josephine Brennan. I think she might be the same Josephine in your story." Tenny felt her heart skip. "Your great-grandmother? So your third cousin, I think? Or some variation of that? I never knew Grandma Josie very well. She died when I was young, but I grew up hearing she was adopted, that her birth parents were unknown." Karen gestured toward the exhibit. "When I saw your presentation advertised, the name Josephine caught my attention. And now, seeing this, seeing the dates and the connection to the Brennan family, it has to be the same person." They moved to a quiet corner of the hall, and Tenny pulled out her genealogical charts. Within 20 minutes, they'd confirmed it. Karen's family tree connected directly to Josephine, which meant she was indeed Tenny's distant cousin. They shared Temperance's blood, Josephine's legacy. "My grandmother never talked about her mother," Karen said. "I always thought it was because she was adopted and didn't know. But now I wonder if she knew more than she said. If Lucinda told her some version of the truth. It's possible. We'll never know for sure. But at least now the story is out there. At least Temperance is remembered." Karen touched the photograph gently through the protective glass. "She was so young, 24 when she died. That's younger than my daughter is now." They exchanged contact information, promised to stay in touch, to share family information and photographs. As Karen left, Tenny felt a warmth spreading through her chest. The story had created connection not just with the past, but with the present, with living family members she'd never known existed. That night, back at her cabin, Tenny pulled out Lucinda's journal one more time. She'd read it so many times that some passages were memorized, but tonight she was looking for something specific. Near the back, written in 1915, when Lucinda would have been 70 years old. "Josephine asked me today about her mother. She is 33 now, a grown woman with children of her own, and for the first time she directly asked what happened. I told her what I have always told her, that her mother died of fever when she was young, that she was brave and loved her very much." Josephine looked at me for a long moment and said, "I think there's more to the story than that." I said nothing. She nodded, kissed my cheek, and said, "Then I'll trust you knew what you were doing." She has never asked again. Perhaps she understands that some secrets are kept out of love, not deception. Tenny closed the journal with tears in her eyes. So Josephine had suspected, had known there were gaps in her own history. But she'd chosen to trust Lucinda, to accept that the silence was protective rather than shameful. There was wisdom in that, a recognition that not all truths need to be spoken, that sometimes love means bearing burdens alone so others don't have to. But times had changed. The stigma that had made Temperance's story dangerous was gone now, replaced by recognition that unwed mothers deserved compassion, not condemnation. That women who made difficult choices in impossible circumstances deserved honor, not shame. Temperance's story could be told now without bringing harm to anyone, and it should be told, had to be told. Tenny's book manuscript sat on her desk, nearly finished. She'd been working on it steadily for months, expanding the archive document into something more accessible, more emotional, more personal. Michelle had read the latest draft and pronounced it beautiful and heartbreaking and important. A small university press had expressed interest in publishing it. Not a huge commercial venture, but something that would ensure the story reached people beyond the local historical society. Students, researchers, anyone interested in women's history or frontier life or stories of courage under impossible circumstances. The book would be called Temperance, a mountain woman's sacrifice. Simple, direct, true. In the acknowledgements, Tenny planned to thank everyone who'd helped Pauline, Vernon, Michelle, David the archivist, even the mission workers and church historians who'd preserved the records that made the research possible. But most of all, she wanted to thank Temperance herself, for having the courage to keep Josephine, for making the impossible choice to die alone, for leaving behind enough evidence that someone, someday, could piece together the truth. Outside, the mountains were dark shapes against a starlit sky. Somewhere up there, on a remote peak that few people ever visited, a wooden marker stood beside an abandoned wagon. The letters were still clear, still readable. Tenny Allard, 1867 to 1891. Beloved mother of Josephine, she chose freedom over fear. She is remembered. And she was, not just by Tenny, but by Michelle, by Vernon, by Pauline, by Karen, and all the other descendants who were learning their own history. By everyone who visited the exhibit or read the book or heard the story secondhand. By anyone who understood that women's courage deserved recognition, that sacrifice deserved honor, that love in its purest form sometimes meant letting go. Tenny walked out onto her porch, wrapped in a blanket against the spring, cold. She'd come to these mountains 3 years ago feeling lost and unmoored, uncertain of her purpose or her place. She'd followed Lucinda's footsteps looking for connection, and she'd found so much more than that. She'd found temperance. She'd found family, she'd found meaning, and in the process she'd found herself not the self she'd been before the divorce, not the person she'd been trying to become, but someone new. Someone who understood that life was about more than personal comfort or conventional success. It was about connection across time, about honoring those who came before, about making sure the stories that mattered didn't disappear. Tenny whispered into the night air, "Thank you, Temperance, for everything, for your courage, for your sacrifice, for the life you made possible. You are remembered. You will always be remembered." The mountains stood silent, as they always did. But Tenny felt deep in her bones that somehow Temperance knew that across the gulf of death and time, the message had been received. A young woman who died alone on a mountain peak 130 years ago was finally, truly at peace. Her story had been told. Her name would live on.